Alrighty, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday, April 22nd. Wow, we are almost through the month. I feel like it's been flying by. Welcome back to another episode of the NBA Returns on Nuts and Bolts Sports. I'm your host, Jordan. With us today, we have two very special guests and a ton to talk about. So we have our man, Randall, and we have our man, Keith. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'm very excited to have you guys today.
Yeah, it's good to be on again.
Yes.
And that intro song gets me going.
Yeah, it's a nice little beat. So this is a StreamYard wizard, basically. She knows everything about it. So she's put together a lot of great stuff for us over the last couple of years. Like I said, lots to talk about. We're talking about Steph Curry. We're talking about Julius Randle and the Knicks. We're talking about Chris Paul, little Anthony Davis. So a lot of big things happening. We're kind of at somewhere in the 75 to 80% mark of the NBA season. So we're starting to wind down. But that doesn't mean that there aren't storylines and a lot of things heating up in the NBA. So we're just going to get right into it. Going to talk about our man, Steph Curry, or at least my man. I know Keith has some adverse words on this. But one thing I think we can all agree on is Steph has been pretty hot lately. Let me pull up his numbers here. This is just since he came back from his tailbone injury. These are his last numbers for the last 2.5 weeks. Been on fire, obviously. 4 games with 10 or more 3-pointers made, helping the Warriors scratch and claw. I think they're a 9 seed right now, if I have my stats correct. Yep, they're a 9 seed, firmly in that play-in. Like I said, he's been absolutely incredible each night. Randall, I'll start with you. Is this the most impressive kind of streak for Steph Curry's career, including all the stuff he did in that 2015-16 season? And do you think he should get any MVP votes, even though the Warriors aren't maybe having the team success that some of these other guys that are in the MVP discussion are having? But should he get something for his efforts? Because at some nights it's a one-man show.
Maybe he'll win Player of the Month. He can accept that. That's for sure. But it's just, it's as a 9th seed in the West. Obviously, it's the West, but you can't win the MVP when you're that low. You're 29-30. But this last month is undeniably at an MVP level, if not higher, than he was doing in 2015-16. You can't guard the man. It's a cheat code in real life, and someone's got to check his brain to see how many chips are in there, because there's got to be there for someone to release a basketball from their hands and make it at a 50% clip at 0.3 seconds is just ridiculous. So you got poor Steph's brother here, just watching as he's the best shooter of all time. He grew up with him, and he can't even recognize him. I'm sure.
Their poor mom. Poor Mrs. Curry to have to watch one son just completely obliterate the other on national TV.
They make those half jerseys, she could wear. She can support both. And she's probably just going to have to cover her mouth every time that he drills a 3 in her brother's face, but that's okay. But so in these clips here, you'll see you got Danny Green trying to get too high, and he goes over the screen, and then Steph just goes to the low, because you want to guard him, you're not going to let him pull up from any shot that he would like, because that's how he gets comfortable. And so normally we think arm's length away, right? That's about a good rule of thumb for playing defense, but that's too much room. You got 0.3 seconds to stop this man from shooting the basketball, so you have to get closer. Then you get closer, then he goes around you, and then he knows how to manipulate defenders as they defend the screen. So there's really nothing you can do. It's not like teams are letting him do this. It's Steph Curry playing the best basketball that he has ever played. And let's be honest, he has to play this way for the Warriors to win. And I'm sure he doesn't mind it. He loves playing this high-level basketball, and it's not like we haven't seen it before, and it's definitely not the last time that we'll see it.
Yeah, for sure. And before I get to Keith there, I think one thing that I've noticed too is I feel like in that 15-16 season where obviously won 73 games, he won unanimous MVP and was 30 points, basically the scoring output that we're seeing now. I feel like back then he was obviously running off of a lot more screens because he had Draymond in his prime, he had Clay running around, he had a lot of other diversions to kind of help him. You mentioned that he's being kind of their only source of offense most nights because he's really getting keyed on by everybody. But I feel like he's so crafty now. I feel like he's able to use little head fakes, little body fakes. Like you mentioned, guys get too high on him. He goes under the screens. He's confident attacking the rim against even bigger centers in this league, which I think is something that he didn't do as much during some of those other seasons. Keith, we've had some discussions, to say the least, this week about the man they call Chef Curry. What are your thoughts on what he's doing? And I know you don't think he should be in any MVP conversation. And for the record, I'm not saying that he should be like top 3 or anything like that. I'm just saying he should get a little recognition for what he's doing. Because if you had an average point guard in this team, I think the Warriors they're in like, no offense, Randall, like Minnesota Timberwolves territory, like some of these the Rockets, they're probably a little bit farther down in the standings. But what have you seen, and what are your thoughts on our man Steph Curry?
I mean, I think the thing that I got a lot of heat for when it comes to Steph is it's not that I think Steph is a bad player. I don't think that by any stretch of the imagination. I've actually really enjoyed watching the stretch of basketball from him. I mean, right now, we get to see Steph play at his full potential. Not to say that he hasn't been playing at his full potential before, but when you look at when they were winning championships and in the contention to win championships, he was playing, 32, 33 minutes a night on seasons. He didn't need to score 40, 50 points a night. And now that he doesn't have Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and the few players that aren't there anymore, we get to see what it actually looks like when he has to take on a full scoring load, which is absolutely amazing to watch. The last, 11, 12, or 13 games that he has been playing when he was on that 30-point streak, absolutely amazing. I didn't mind it. Where really got under my skin is people not even saying that he deserves to be in the MVP conversation, or is them saying he should be MVP because of that single stretch. When you look at what he's done throughout the rest of the season before that stretch, I know he missed a lot of games in March because of the tailbone injury, but the games that he played, he only averaged 25.2 points per game. And then there was about a 13-game stretch to where he only scored over 34 times, and a lot of times where he barely cracked 20. So do I think he's having a great stretch? Yes. Do I think he's very important to the Warriors? Yes. But when you look at his full season as a compilation in comparison to Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid, what LeBron was doing before he got hurt, I mean, maybe he'll get some MVP votes, but for me, he's pretty low on that totem pole unless he would finish the rest of the season like he had been on that stretch, which that tailored off last night. He didn't not have a great late night last night. But just looking at the season as a whole, I don't think he has a fair chance at MVP. But watching him play, absolutely amazing. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever.
All right. Well, at least we can get that out of you, because it really is. Like, I was thinking about it pretty much all last night and today. And like I said, he fell off last night. I think he was 6 of 23 from the field or whatever, which is bound to happen eventually. But for a kid that was 6'3", he's $180 soaking wet, 3-star recruit, going to Davidson was his biggest offer, and for him to go from like all that to like what he is now, I feel like in the moment we think it's really cool what he's doing, but I feel like 10 years from now when he's finally retired, I think it's going to be one of those things we look back and like, what are the odds that could have happened? Like, they got to be pretty astronomical. Most guys his size don't have a shot at being a starter in this league, let alone, I would say, a pretty big game changer. This is
definitely not at the rate that he was shooting threes. That's something that's going to be hard to overcome. Like, I can see Zion going on a streak where he scores 30 for 20 games in a row just because he's unstoppable down low. There's nothing you can do about that. But as far as shooting ability, we're not going to see that from anyone else, at least not for a long time, because hands down, Steph is the greatest shooter in NBA history.
Absolutely. And that's the thing too, is like, not only is his volume so impressive, right? The guy's taking 12 threes a game this year. He's going to pass Ray Allen at some point next season, probably in the first third of it, for most three-pointers made all time. But the fact that he maintains such a high shooting percentage while taking that volume, there's guys that take volume. Like, look at Trae Young, for example. He takes a very high volume of threes. He's a good three-point shooter. He's not great. And there are other guys that I can't think of that also take a high volume but don't make the highest percentage. Steph is able to maintain such a high efficiency shooting the ball from all over the three-point line. And I think that's something that's super impressive. This is today's list, Basketball Reference, for the MVP tracker in order of what Basketball Reference thinks. So they don't actually have Curry in there, but they do have Jokic, they have James Harden, Giannis, Kawhi, Rudy Gobert, LeBron, Kyrie, Jimmy Butler, Doncic, and Mitchell. One guy that is missing that I'm surprised, I know he's missed some time, is Embiid. I was surprised to see that he's not in there. I know he missed, about 2.5 weeks there with his injury. And at that point, I kind of counted him out too, but I felt like he's kind of getting a little disrespected. But would you guys, I guess, real quickly before we move on to Chris Paul, would we say like we're in agreement that Jokic is the favorite unless some injury happens or his game suddenly falls off?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's hard to say, yeah, for sure he's the MVP because I have no idea what they consider MVP anymore at this point. But by traditional standard, he should be MVP.
Yeah, it seems like, he's top, like, in terms of, like, his, the eye test, watching him play, he's absolutely phenomenal. He's been carrying them all year. They're 4-0 without Jamal Murray since Murray tore his ACL. Jokic has been helping lead that charge as well, which I think is a huge boost for his case because everyone kind of expected them to stumble, and they haven't done that yet. And then, if you want to look into the analytics side of it, which, some media members do, some don't, I feel like I'm with you. Like, I don't know what they look at. Every media member is kind of different. Everyone who has a vote kind of, it's to each their own. But even his analytics, he's tops in the league and all the analytical stuff, the PER, VORP, box plus minus, everything. So it seems like unless his game falls off or he gets hurt, I'm not going to say he's a lock to win it, but he's definitely the favorite. Which good for him. He's also a phenomenal guy. We could spend a half an hour on Jokic too. But we're going to talk about another guy who plays the same position as Steph Curry, and that's longtime veteran Chris Paul. He passed, let me pull up the list here, passed Magic Johnson, which is obviously one of the bigger names in NBA history, for 5th all-time in assists the other night. And he's obviously not slowing down anytime soon. Chris Paul's another guy, he's turned around the Hornets before they were the Pelicans when he got there. He goes to the Clippers. He helps Lob City. They're all of a sudden in the title hunt every year. He goes to Houston, ditto, and then he goes to Oklahoma City, presumably to have his career be done. Instead, he turns them around into a competitive playoff team. And now he's come to Phoenix, where they've struggled habitually since basically Steve Nash was traded back in the early 2010s. And now they're the second best team in the West and one of the title favorites as well. I don't know. I'll start with you, Keith. What are your thoughts on Chris Paul, what he's done, not only this season, but his kind of his entire career being, I don't want to say a regular season winner because he has kind of a lack of finals. He doesn't have a finals appearance. He's had some memorable chokes in the playoffs. But what are your thoughts on Chris Paul, the achievement of passing Magic Johnson, and, what are your thoughts on him as like a point guard overall?
I think overall he has to be maybe not one of the most disrespected, but definitely one of the most underrated point guards of all time. The issue with the NBA is they have what they call, or like what I like to call, a championship toxicity. Meaning if a player doesn't have a championship, he can't be considered great in any way because he doesn't have a championship. There's definitely some performances that Chris Paul could have been better in the playoffs, but it's not like he's been a full-out choker in the playoffs. When you're playing against teams like the Lakers or when they had Kobe in his prime, the Thunder, Golden State, a lot of that does not fall on him. You can maybe put Steph's performance on him or Dame's performance on him as far as the defensive perspective, but a lot of people forget that it still is a team game. He is not a player that's going to score you 50 a night. He is a old school traditional point guard that distributes the ball. So if he's distributing the ball and players are not scoring, that doesn't necessarily fall on him. He can take over a game and score when he needs to, but that's not what he wants to do. That's not what he likes to do. Even if you look at him this season, he's still having a respectable season points-wise. He's averaging just a tenth under 16 points a game, less or a little more than 2 turnovers a game, while averaging almost 9 assists a game. You can't ask for a lot more from your point guard, especially when you have someone like Devin Booker on your team that's taking the load of the majority of the scoring. He's one of the best point guards in my book, but I think he gets left out of that conversation often solely because he does not have a championship.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think you make a good point too about how it is, basketball is such a team game. And, Obviously, in New Orleans, he didn't really have a full complement of help, and he went up against, whether it was Kobe's Lakers, whether it was Tim Duncan and the Spurs at that time as well. He went up against those guys and just wasn't able to get past them. I remember 2011 playoffs. Lakers won 4-2 in that first round series, but Chris Paul was absolutely phenomenal and single handedly won them 2 games. So. It wasn't for lack of trying there. And I think he gets a little bit of a bad rap for those Lob City teams too. I mean, yes, they had the blown lead against the Thunder where he had those turnovers late with Westbrook. And then next year they blew that 3-1 lead to Houston. However, I thought he didn't have a full complement of help there either because Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan weren't scoring beyond 10, 12 feet. And his wings it was a rotation of, Willie Green, Caron Butler, I think Paul Pierce for a hot second. Like they had a consistent, old, pretty much washed up group of guys out on the wings, and Chris Paul was tasked with trying to push them as far as he could. So I think you're right. He gets a little bit of a bad rap there, and I think he's one of the few guys that I've seen, at least in my generation. I've seen all the Magic highlights. I've seen Stockton and those guys, but for guys that I've seen play live, he's one of the best guys, if not the best at. He knows exactly when to get certain guys going, and then he knows when to get himself going when the team needs him to score in bursts and stretches. Or if Devin Booker's, for example, if Devin Booker's struggling this year, and if he's struggling in a game, late, he'll Chris Paul will be like, okay, I'll take over late. But if Devin Booker's hot, he's going to run plays for Devin Booker. He's the best at kind of that balance, and it's very difficult. I mean, the point guard position is one of the toughest positions to play in any sport, really, because you have to manage everything from how the offense is run to the egos of your players that you're playing with, making sure guys get enough shots so they're happy, making sure centers get enough touches so they're happy. So it's a very difficult thing to do, and Chris Paul has come as close to mastering it as anybody. We're going to do our top 5 point guards ever here in a second, but Randall, I wanted to give you a shot too. What are your thoughts on Chris Paul? Again, passing Magic Johnson for 5th all time. What are your thoughts on what he's doing this season for his career? Give us your Chris Paul take.
So with Chris, remember when we talked about the All-Star game and we were trying to decide who should be an All-Star, Chris Paul or Devin Booker?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I said Chris Paul, and this is exactly why. He's been doing 3.9 to 1 assist to turnover ratio, and this is as of
we got stats. I love this.
This is as of February 22nd. So in the last 11 games, he's had 7.8 assists to 1 turnover, almost twice as many.
Here's the graphic. Yep, right here.
This is literally insane. He's perfect almost with the basketball, as close to perfect as he possibly could be. Mm-hmm. And he gets not only himself to his spots that he likes, he gets everybody on the team to the spots they like. He knows when to get Devin involved. He knows when to get a wide open Cam Johnson at 3. He knows how to get Mikal Bridges involved. He knows how to coach these players and get Monte Williams' vision onto the court. It's very, very prudent that Chris Paul is in the game for the Suns to win. And it's obvious that he has made this team what they are. So he's the perfect complement to this team. And I can't even believe that he's already at number 5. I feel like I've been watching him from the majority of his career, and he's already top 5 assists all time. Mm-hmm. I did the math, and he averages 9.4 assists for his career. And he has 5,655 assists left to get John Stockton. Mm-hmm. So he would have to do 7.5 more seasons of 9.4 assists a game to get to John Stockton. So that's obviously a huge gap, and I highly doubt that he'll be able to make it to that point. But this is for John Stockton, that's a credit to him for throwing it to Karl Malone every time. He's had that reliable piece that has gotten him to the finals twice and to the Western Conference Finals numerous amounts of times. Mm-hmm. So now that Chris Paul has a better pairing, I feel like they're going to be able to make it deep into the playoffs as long as he can coach up these young guys that really haven't seen that high level of basketball before. So that's really going to be the interesting point, is Chris Paul and Monte Williams going to be able to coach these young guys and to steal a first-round series. And you see what I just said. I caught myself. Steal a first-round series. They are still a very young team, even though they have one of the older point guards in the league. Mm-hmm. And they just have a lot more to prove before they can be title contenders. But I would not want to see them in the first round because they are very motivated and a very skilled team that knows their strengths.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, they're playing some of their best basketball too. I think they're getting smoked tonight in Boston, but second night of a back-to-back after a long game against Philly last night. But they've been playing some of their best basketball recently. They're pretty close to Utah. They're a game and a half out really on Utah, who's kind of been a little bit of a rut. So the 1 seed is attainable. The question is, who wants the 1 seed? Because I think the Lakers and Nuggets are almost locked into that 4-5 matchup, which would mean potentially a healthy Lakers team.
Which is a nightmare for me as a Nuggets fan.
Oops, sorry. But I mean, all credit again to Chris Paul. I mean, I'll pull this up again because this didn't get enough credit. I mean, 67 assists and 3 turnovers. It doesn't matter. Forget the assist part. It's the turnover part for me, because when you play, you watch these guys play every night. It doesn't matter if you play point guard, center, or the wing. If you come off the bench or you start, you're bound to turn it over. Like they have so many athletic, good defensive guys in this league. They're going to pick your pocket, or they're going to block a passing lane, or you're just going to do something dumb like throw it out of bounds too high or whatever. So the fact that he's only has 3 turnovers in their last 7 games while being the primary ball handler and trying to get everybody involved and making, the degree of difficulty on a lot of his passes are tougher than most. That's incredible. And, I think I was looking all day. I couldn't find it. I can only find this, which shows they're the top 10 assist guys in NBA history. But if you look at all those, like you look at, Stockton, obviously played, so many years with Karl Malone. But like, look at those other guys. They have a ton of assists, which, they're all blending in somewhere there. But look at Chris Paul's turnovers. He's the only one. He's got under 2,600 turnovers. The next closest is Gary Payton. And Gary Payton wasn't necessarily known as a 15-10 guy for most of his career. He had a little bit of a run there in the mid to late 90s. But the fact that Chris Paul's turnovers are so low, I mean, it's almost a 5-to-1 turnover ratio. That's astounding to me that he's been able to maintain this since day one. And I remember when he came into the league, I thought he was going to be good, but didn't know how good. And then by his 3rd year, he was finishing top 3 in the MVP conversation. The Hornets were one of the best teams in the league, and he had established himself as the best point guard in the league. I remember we used to have those silly Chris Paul versus Darren Williams conversations that we used to have, and like it was fun because Darren Williams.
And then Darren Williams decided to just be bad all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was at that. It's funny that was even entertained at lunch tables and on TV shows and talk shows and whatnot. So yeah, Chris Paul's been phenomenal, and I haven't always liked him. There's been times where I think he whines too much and he can be a little bit of a powder and he gets a little dirty, but I think overall his body of work is super impressive. And Keith, you brought it up, I think at the beginning of your point, saying he's the most disrespected kind of superstar point guard that we've had. Really, if ever, which is going to transition us into kind of our main topic tonight, since it seemed to be floating around. We had a big discussion, Keith, myself, and some others in the Twitter DMs the other day about point guards and who's the best ever, yada, yada, yada. So that's what we're going to do now. Let me pull up, Randall, let me pull up yours here. What I had the guys do, for the record for everyone watching, is I had these guys send me either their 5 best point guards ever or the top 5 in order, however they wanted to do it, and just ask them, what that list was and if Chris Paul fit into it. So let me pull up Randall's first. So Randall's you got Magic 1, you got Jerry West 2, which is interesting. We'll circle back to that. You have Isaiah Thomas, not the Celtics one, not the 5'9" guy, the guy who played for the Pistons, who won 2 titles in the 80s. Do your homework. Then you have Jason Kidd 4, Oscar Robertson 5, and then you told me you had Chris Paul just on the outside 6. So just briefly, give me kind of like a breakdown of your list, why you have those guys there, and also just touch on the Jerry Weston, because that's something that, like, I classify West as a 2 guard, but you have him here as a point guard, which is totally fine. But just touch on your list and tell me why you picked those guys.
So obviously you got to go with Magic Johnson first all time.
No doubt.
Just the first thing that comes to mind is you guys seen that meme before? He just has so much fun on the court, and he is the one that coined, or didn't create the term, but because of his style of play, he is Showtime Lakers. He's set up everybody on that team exactly where they needed to be and is a winning guy. He's been winning ever since college, high school, and he's made some of the best series that we've ever watched with him versus Larry Bird on numerous occasions. And Larry Bird is one of the most vicious winners and trash talkers, and he had a very fantastic team on his own. But Magic seemed to get under his skin, and they would be able to, go at each other. And I think Magic got the upper hand many of times. And there's just not. It's very unmatched for Magic, and a guy of his size, with his speed and his passing ability with that size and speed is just unprecedented and very difficult to replicate. When you get to Jerry West, he put his coach's visions onto the floor. Mm-hmm. And like I said, he's a winning guy as well. And we see him today he's been, what do they call him? Advisor for all these different franchises. And that makes me believe, obviously I didn't watch the guy. I didn't know everything about him, but he got who he wanted around him. I feel like he's been doing this his entire career. And so that just tells me that he knows what he needs. He knows what kind of game he has, and he knows his strengths and his teammates' strengths. And for point guards, you have to know your teammates' strengths, and you have to know how to adjust. And he did that with the very best of them. And obviously people forget. I even forgot because I went back into this list and I was like, man, this guy is truly ridiculous. And he, was setting the standard for the league, and everybody else had to follow. Mm-hmm. And then we got Isaiah Thomas, back-to-back bad boy Pistons. You kidding me? This guy was ruthless, playing on an injured ankle, clutching up with that injured ankle, and just beating some of these vicious teams, beating Michael Jordan, sweeping him one time, and then obviously he got swept, and that was really ugly. But that's just the passing of the torch in an ugly way, where you drop the torch on the ground and tell the other guy to pick it up.
Yeah.
That just shows me that he is a fantastic winner, and he takes pride in his work and takes pride in his team, and will put his team before anybody else. So in terms of a true point guard, he is a great example of how to stay tenacious and to do anything and everything to win. And shout out Chuck Daly too.
And everything that I read before, like I've read and seen about Isaiah too. Isaiah is like kind of Chris Paul before Chris Paul in terms of what I mentioned, which is getting his teammates involved and then also knowing when to get himself. Because there were games where he could score 30, 35 if they needed him to, but for his career averages, I think he's like 18-9 for his career, or 20-9 for his career. So it wasn't like he had a very delicate balancing act as well. So that's like where Chris Paul kind of modeled it after. But
absolutely,
what do you have to wrap up your list there? We obviously have a guy from our generation and then someone from way back in the past.
Yes, sir. Jason Kidd, man. I grew up watching Jason Kidd, and I loved how he pushed the ball up the floor, and he was always a step ahead of everybody else. Mm-hmm. So his IQ was always through the roof, and he's made it to the finals with some pretty bad teams. And then he ultimately won with Dirk Nowitzki in there 2011. And him and Dirk was just a fantastic pairing, and I wish it could have happened sooner because he probably would have had a couple more championships. He just knows what each player's strengths is, again, but that's just the job of a point guard. And he also was able to hide himself defensively. He wasn't the best defender, but also he would get those high IQ plays where he knew somebody was posting up at the basket and he could poke it out. He would be able to still get some steals and get it in transition and push that break. And he was always knew where to go, where to fake to, around the back, wrap it around to the other side. It was beautiful.
Oh, his transition passing is if you're a high school point guard, like go watch Jason Kidd in transition because you could learn a lot.
Exactly. Thank you. And then last but not least, we got Oscar Robertson. Averaged a 30-point triple-double throughout his career and averaged a triple-double throughout many seasons. I think it was just one season or maybe even more.
Just one, but he was very close in some others and did it on some – he carried his team farther than they probably should have gone a couple of years.
Exactly. And so he's able to get his own, obviously 30 points a game, and then – getting as many rebounds as he did and as many assists as he did. He was running around the court constantly, and I don't know how this dude had energy for all of this. He set the standard for putting it all on the floor. and he won that championship with Kareem, and it was just a fantastic duo. And Kareem would have done it without him, and he wouldn't have done it without Kareem. But he just set a huge standard on how to let it all out there and don't care what anybody else says and get yours.
Fair enough. And so you mentioned you have Chris Paul 6 there. Do you think there's a chance Chris Paul leaps into the top 5 if he has, let's just say, a deep playoff run this year and plays at a pretty high level for another year or two? Or like, what's the case for Chris Paul to get into your top 5?
If it wasn't for that hamstring, he'd be in the top 5 already. You know, he would have already played in the finals because they would have beat the Warriors when they were in that Game 7.
Oh boy!
And then the year before that, he had the same similar injury. I can't remember what it was the year before that, but you know, he just gets that time. He gets to that mode where
he wears down a little bit too at the end of the year.
He does, because you know he's relied on so heavily to run the offense that you don't really have somebody that can come off the bench and do what he does. So what he does is obviously, like I said, as close to perfect as you could possibly get. But that hamstring got him. And even with that hamstring injury, when he was on the Clippers versus the Spurs, he had that clutch fall away shot and wide right hand over tip.
I'll maintain that was a push shot for the entirety of my basketball career, but that's just me.
It's Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan's huge. You should not be able to push off of Tim Duncan.
You don't get to push off on Tim Duncan. That's just disrespectful to a top 10 player.
Oh man, I love Tim Duncan. I grew up watching him as well, so no disrespect at all. But the fact that he is able to do that, and just like he clutched at his hamstring right before that happened. So
yeah,
and like I said, he gets to his spots. He knows how to get to them and when to get to them, and he just dictates the pace of the game. And it's Chris Paul's offense out there featuring Monty Williams' setups for everything else, you know, inbound plays and making sure guys get theirs and rotations, of course. So shouts out to those guys there. I wouldn't doubt if Chris Paul became a coach, but if he were to able to get, you know, maybe even an MVP or a championship or even getting to the finals, I probably would have put him higher. But as of right now, I feel like this is a good spot for him and some room to grow.
Okay, that's fair. I think it's obviously a very good list. I mean, it's hard when you start talking the words all time at any position, or if you just do an all time list in general, somebody's going to get left out. And there's always going to be. I mean, these are all obviously Hall of Famers. Chris Paul will be first ballot as well. Keith, I'll head over to you now. Again, we talked about this pre-show. You didn't give me an order. You just gave me 5 of them. So I'll let you kind of dictate how you want to discuss them, or if you want to piggyback, because I know you and Randall have some similarities here. So this is Keith's list here. Again, no order. He's got the big O, Magic, Steve Nash, an entry on this list. One that I will be sure to debate with him shortly. He's got Chris Paul in, somewhere in his top 5, and then he wraps up obviously with Isaiah Thomas. So Keith, I'll give you the floor here if you want to explain your list. Explain, if there's anybody that just missed the cut. If there's, if you want to, can you at least do you agree that Magic's 1, or do you have are you still unsure about who's 1?
I according to my personal preference, I cannot decide between Oscar Robertson and Magic Johnson.
So it's tight. It's tight for you.
It's too tight to call for that.
Over this man.
Thank you. Yes.
I found it while you were going. I was like, I knew I had to play it.
I definitely have a lot of respect for Magic Johnson, especially that my favorite player of all time, LeBron James, pretty much modeled his whole playing style after Magic Johnson. Mm-hmm. But when you think of a point guard and what they're asked to do, I mean, they're the quarterback of an NBA team. And they're kind of the ultimate flex position on the court for an NBA team. They need to be able to score when asked upon. They need to be able to pass when they need to pass or run the offense. And they got to rebound the ball as well, which is why I like Russell Westbrook so much, because, I mean, he does whatever that team needs. Whatever team he's on, he does what they need. But there were a couple of players I think are just outside the top 5. Jason Kidd, I think he would probably be number 6 for me, just outside of the top 5. And then another glaring omission, I think, would be John Stockton. He is the all-time assist leader. he has that assist record that is probably never going to be broken. I mean, maybe Harden has an outside shot if he keeps on the trajectory that he is, but I don't think he gets there. Just the thing about John Stockton is the best thing going for him was also the worst thing going for him in perspective. Him and Karl Malone running that pick and roll in the time that they played was darn near unstoppable. You just have to think that if they ran that play now against players like Anthony Davis, Giannis, Joel Embiid, LeBron James, would it be as successful in today's NBA as it was back then? And I don't think it would be as successful.
That's right.
But still, you can only play who you play in front of. And when he played, he was unstoppable with that play with Karl Malone. So I still give him credit for that. And it was clearly highly successful because he has that many assists. But the players that did make the top 5, there are players that could do a little bit of everything. I mean, especially when we look at Oscar Robertson, that triple-double king. He might get passed by Brody. We'll see as far as the number of triple-doubles. But Magic Johnson as a rookie coming in and playing center. A lot of people forget that Steve Nash could score the ball when he wanted to score the ball.
Great shooter.
Great shooter. He was slept on a lot. I mean, obviously, Isaiah Thomas, one of the best point guards, one of the toughest point guards we've ever seen. He was able to overcome Jordan. Before Jordan had good teams, we got to add that qualifier in there. But he still did beat him regularly when he had the
battled the Bird Celtics too. It wasn't like they didn't have an easy road to the finals. They had to beat some good teams.
They had to beat some good teams. He did beat some all-time greats to get his championships. But I mean, when you think of those 5, Oscar Robertson, Magic Johnson, Chris Paul, who, like I said, I think is stupidly disrespected and underrated. When you think of who you want to run a team, I mean, neither of those will probably – actually, Steve Nash will probably be better in today's NBA, as well as Oscar Robertson. I don't know how good Magic Johnson and Isaiah Thomas would be just because of the aspect of what's expected from a point guard from a scoring standpoint. I don't know if they would be able to keep up at that level, but Chris Paul could score a lot more if he wanted to. Steve Nash would be able to score a lot more if he wanted to. But in the traditional sense, I'm old school when it comes to point guards, and those are just a personification of that.
That's fair. Quick question on Magic. Would Magic be like a lock for you for number 1 if he didn't miss 4 of his prime years because of the HIV? Like if that whole thing didn't happen, because that stopped him at age 31, 32, and he still probably had at least, I mean, look at Chris Paul's doing right now, who still probably had at least 2 or 3 more years of prime Magic. Would his resume look a little bit better and maybe help him if he didn't miss that time, or would that not matter to you?
I think the thing that hurts Magic the most in the long run is something that's out of his control. Like, he just played on teams that were so good.
They were stacked, yep.
Like, if he would have done a little more without the good teams that he played on, definitely he would be hands down number 1. But definitely you can't take away from him. He was a point guard of the Showtime Lakers, a very complex system in its time. So that's why he's so far up. But I have to knock him a little bit because the teams that he played on were just so stupid good. That's
fair. They were pretty stacked. Randall, what are your thoughts? Because you didn't have Nash in your top 5. What are your thoughts on Nash? Because I have a thought, but I wanted to let everyone else get theirs out first.
Nash just always came up short. You know, he didn't shoot enough. He's quoted saying that he could have shot more. And I think that's a detriment to him wanting to get his guys going and being a true point guard and not being very selfish. If he was a little more selfish and wanted to, score the ball and be truly, truly a dynamic point guard, I feel like he would have been able to overcome some of those struggles. But just because those are there and he made it to what did I say last time? I think he played in the 118 playoff games and didn't make the finals. I think that's just inexcusable. You can't have that much playoff experience and not find a way to get over the hump. Maybe that's not his fault, but It's on his record, and you got to knock him for it. And I even have Chris Paul above Steve Nash because Chris Paul is just cerebral, and he's much more clean, and he knows what he wants, knows what he needs, and knows how to go get it. I don't think Nash had those qualities, and it's also why I don't think the Nets are going to win the NBA Finals either.
Keith's over here triggered in the corner. The one thing I'll give Nash credit for that's not his fault. 07 probably wasn't his fault with the Robert Horry hip check and Amari getting suspended. That was probably their best chance. Yeah, that one I can't I think that's a dumb rule. Like they suspended Horton Tucker the other day for going 5 feet from the bench too, and I think that's the dumbest rule. My thing with Nash, and I'm going to show my list in a second. Spoiler, he's not on it. Not that he's not a great point guard. I feel like I've been very harsh on him. Keith has seen a lot of my harshness come out, which it's not that I don't think he's a great point guard because like he is. I mean, phenomenal passing, one of the best shooting point guards we ever had as well. Almost underrated because he didn't shoot as much as maybe he could have. And I mean, if it were an all-star game draft and I had like historical point guards to pick from, Nash is probably one of my first picks because he's going to get everybody involved. He's going to make everybody happy, which is, a role of the point guard position. My thing with Nash is he didn't ascend to winning in back-to-back MVPs, which I don't think he should have either, but he didn't get to either one of those in that high level with Phoenix until he was in his 30s. And they all of a sudden they relaxed on the hand check rules. Everything opened up. That allowed for the whole, 7 seconds or less thing with the Suns. Not that they wouldn't have been good without that, but the hand check thing helped out. And he defensively, I don't think he ever did it for me. He was somebody that you really had to hide. And you look at some of the guys like, not that Magic was phenomenal defensively, but Oscar Robertson was good defensively. Chris Paul is a 9-time all defense. Isaiah Thomas, fierce defender. So I think Nash for me just has a little bit more of there's more of a gap in certain areas than some of these other guys. And I don't know. I guess I'm biased against Steve Nash because I also got him on the Lakers like at a complete end, and he just completely got hurt and broke down. And like that's the Steve Nash I also remember seeing and getting excited.
That was their fault for signing him and thinking that was going to work in the first place.
It was a terrible trade. I wish we could have that trade back so fast, but we wouldn't have had to make that trade had they allowed the Chris Paul trade to go to. That's a whole nother podcast on itself. So we've seen Keith and Randall's list here. Mine's also pretty similar. I'll show you mine. Mine has one glaring change, though, that I might get a little crap for. But
I think I know what it is.
Here's my list. Number one is Magic. I don't think there's a big debate over it. Respect to Oscar Robertson. Did a lot of things for his team. Dealt with a lot of crap, too. Magic played in the era with Bird where everyone loved the Lakers. They loved the Celtics. Basketball was getting popular. Oscar played in an era where he dealt with a lot of racism and racial stuff, night in and night out from not just fans, but coaches, players, teammates. So I think he deserves a lot of credit because that's not something you can just shake off and play through. So all credit to him, but he's just behind Magic for me. Magic was the ultimate playmaker. Some of the passes he makes, just look at the highlights. I'll show it again. While he played on stacked teams with the Lakers, they had to have the right person to make sure Kareem got going, to make sure James Worthy was getting his touches, to make sure Byron Scott, Michael Cooper, and some of those other shooters were getting their rhythm shots as well. So I think Magic was so good at doing that and also finding his way to score. There's nobody better other than maybe LeBron and maybe Giannis in a couple of years that I've seen get a rebound and go coast to coast. Whether it ends up being a pass or a layup or dunk, he's just had that ability to get the ball with his size, being 6'9". I just thought I thought he was incredible. I wish the HIV thing didn't happen because I think he could have had a couple more deep playoff runs. And, it feels weird to say that Magic's not in the top 5 for assists all time, but you look at his games played, he's got the fewest amount. I think if you gave him another 3 or 4 years at about 850 assists a year, he'd be second. And I think that's very reasonable. So he's my number 1. Oscar's number 2 for the reasons I just stated. 3 is where it gets interesting. Got our man Steph Curry. It's weird because I classify Jerry West as a 2 guard. Not that I say he can't be a point guard, but I just think of him more as a 2 guard because he habitually scored 27 to 30 points a game for pretty much his whole career. But I classify Curry as a point guard. It kind of doesn't make sense because they're both kind of one and the same in the way that they play. However, it's my list, so my rules. I think Steph, while he still has another 2 or 3 or 4 years playing at an elite level, is everything we've talked about. Obviously the best shooter of all time. Look, your kid's trying to tell you Steph Curry. He's saying your kid's saying Steph Curry. Steph's a winning player. He's one of the best teammates I've ever seen too. I mean, I can't imagine you being the guy winning MVP, your team coming so close to winning the 16 finals, and then Kevin Durant just waltzes in and is just, he expects to be the star. He expects to get a bunch of shots and things to, go a certain way. And Curry handled that with such grace. And him just saying, okay, yeah, you can be the star. I'm going to score mine, and I'm going to help us win. And, you can get the finals MVPs, you can get the postseason, accolades, and everyone can talk about you. I don't think that there's more than a couple guys in this league that are stars that could do that. Like, I don't know if MJ would have just been okay with that. I don't know if Kobe would have been okay with that. Duncan probably would have been a guy that would have been cool with it. But I think Curry's, his ability as a teammate too. He's a great leader. He doesn't get flustered that often. He's always pretty cool under pressure. And he just has some big moments. When you talk about Chris Paul and James Harden there in that series where Harden got hurt, or when Chris Paul got hurt, that Game 7, Curry's scoreless in the first half, and then he goes off for 30 in the second half. It closes him out. So he's had enough big moments for me to be third. Fourth, Isaiah Thomas. Don't really need to go into that again, but just a consummate winner, one of the most competitive guys we've ever had, and someone who, like we had talked about, manage that delicate art of getting his teammates involved, getting them in a rhythm, and then also taking over when they needed to, scoring 25 points on a busted ankle in the third quarter of the 88 finals against the Lakers is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen on a basketball court. So kudos to him for, doing what he did at his size as well. And then 5, I have Jason Kidd. I think he was a tremendous two-way player for most of his career. He went from, Phoenix to New Jersey back before they moved to Brooklyn, took them to back-to-back finals with, good players, but not great players. And then just unfortunately ran into Kobe and Shaq and then Tim Duncan. So not really his fault. He could have had more championships if he ran into the finals at a different time, but just a tremendous guy, transition, always able to make this. He saw the pass before the pass, which is something that a lot of guys struggle to do. So, and then I didn't put it on here, but I'd probably have Chris Paul 6th. Just on the outside. However, if they have a deep playoff run this year and or next year in Phoenix, I could see him bumping up into that thing. Because, I'll put Chris Paul's stats kind of on the screen here. I meant to put them up earlier. This is his stats through 16 seasons. It's 18-9 a game. The numbers are good. Field goal percentage, 3-point percentage is good. 2.5 turnovers a game we already talked about. 11-time All-Star. He's 9-time All-NBA. I think he has a shot to make 10-time. He might get All-NBA third team this year. Ditto for all defense. He might make their second team. He's a 6-time steals champ, which is ridiculous. He's one of the only guys I've seen that averages over 2 steals a game. 4-time assist champ, rookie of the year, and then 12-time playoffs, about to be 13 in the next 2 weeks. So, those are our lists. I think that was, I think we all had a lot of similarities, obviously, with Magic and Oscar, Jason Kidd, Isaiah Thomas, a couple of differences with Nash and Steph Curry. But I think overall, I think it's a testament to some of the guys like Curry, Nash, and Paul. To be included on that list, some of the things that they've done, I feel like we take it for granted, but then you look at, I don't know if you guys have played basketball recently, but I have, and I think that I can go out there and do these things. And then I go out there and I'm like, I'm just trying to make a normal chest pass to the corner. And these guys are out here throwing no look dimes and stuff. So it's really incredible. And, I guess my hope is we just don't take Steph Curry, don't take Chris Paul for granted, because the way basketball is trending, especially for Chris Paul, I feel like we're not going to see his type of play as much anymore.
Especially with the NBA going towards positionless basketball.
Right. Yeah, and you have guys like Giannis who are handling the ball more, forwards and stuff like that. And obviously the focus now is take a 3-pointer or a layup. But Chris Paul is also quietly the master of the mid-range too. His mid-range foul line jumper, it's as automatic as any shot I've ever seen. if I needed a get out of jail shot, if they're you can pick one guy to take a shot, I'd be like, yes, that. Chris Paul weaving in through the pick, keeping the defender on his back, and then taking the foul line jumper. Any final comments on anything with the point guards before we move on to the second half of the show?
let me just.
Do you want to give me crap for Curry? If you want to, you can. It's cool.
Yeah, I'll let you take that.
Here's why Curry falls short in the all-time point guard list for me. Is that everything? If we want to say he is the best scoring point guard of all time, that is no question. Yeah. That is not up for debate. But when you add the totality of what's there, I mean, the only knock against Steve Nash I have was he wasn't as great on defense. A lot of that had to do with Mike D'Antoni being his coach, but different conversation for another time.
We can have a Mike D'Antoni bashing session later if you want. No problem.
As Kellerman would say, and Tony.
Yeah.
But at least with Steve Nash, he was also 5-time NBA assist leader. You look at Chris Paul, 9-time NBA All-Defense. Isaiah Thomas, All-Defense. Oscar Robertson, triple-double machine. Magic Johnson, extremely versatile. If you take away Steph's scoring and compare his other stats to those other point guards, and like in areas of rebounds, assists, defense, outside of Steve Nash, it's just lacking in those departments. He was the steals leader once. I'll give him credit for that, but has yet to make even third-team All-NBA defense. And we were saying in the DM, I think his defense can be underrated. As a system defensive player, he is great at what he does. But when it comes to one-on-one defense, he is extremely lacking. I mean, at least every once in a while, you can count on Steve Nash in a tough spot to make a great defensive play. You can't do that with Steph Curry. And that shows more and more with Klay Thompson not playing when he has to play some of those tougher wing players. I think he's one of the top 10 point guards of all time, but I would put him lower on that list just because his success is so heavy based on his scoring.
All right. I mean, I could like scrap the rest of the show and we could just do the Curry debate again. But, Randall, any closing thoughts on Curry in that list before we move on to Eastern Conference discussion?
So Curry wasn't, he's not the best at putting the coach's vision on the floor. It's everybody adjusts to Curry, right? Curry's not adjusting to his team, and we can kind of see that now because he's sticking true to what he's always done best. And, you got someone like Andrew Wiggins, Kelly Oubre, and they haven't been able to show out like we would like them to. And I feel like a true point guard would be able to get those guys in those spots, and a true point guard would realize that he needs those guys to be effective so that he doesn't have to work his ass off every night, literally his ass off. He's got that butt pad on running around here like a squirrel throwing up threes in 0.3 seconds, a flashing of an eye. And, you just can't even keep up. But like what Keith said, without it, which is really hard to look at because there's so much of it, he's just not a true point guard. But you got people like Jerry West, who also wasn't a true point guard, but he also showed up on defense and made his teammates better. I just don't see that with Steph unless he has good players around him. And if it wasn't for Kyrie and Kevin Love being hurt in, what was that, 15, 16, or sorry,
14, 15.
14, 15. Thank you.
Oh, you're gonna open this door. Okay.
I'm opening that door.
Oh no.
For sure.
I'm gonna let you in on. I'm not gonna go down that road because I could literally spend hours on that whole like. I will say this little not so subtle secret about this team now. Kelly, I've watched because I've been trying to watch Steph as much as possible this year. I've also seen a lot of Kelly Oubre, Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole, Juan Toscano, and I'll give you a little like subtle truth about them. They stink. Kelly Oubre.
You don't think I know Wiggins stinks?
Toscano, yeah, you should. Toscano plays hard. Jordan Poole's a young guy, so I'll cut them both a little slack. But Kelly Oubre has shot the ball so poorly. I mean, he's atrocious from three-point range. I think he's like sub 32% from three. He's good for a couple. He's good for a dunk a game. That's about it.
He had that stretch where he missed like 3 games worth of 3-pointers and then finally hit one, and his whole team celebrated. You got a problem when your team is celebrating making a first quarter 3-pointer.
Exactly. And Wiggins, ditto. You said, Andrew Wiggins from his time in Minnesota. He's just an average player. He's just very average. He has no concept of showing up in big moments. He's not a guy I would ever want on my team. And I hope he just stays very far away from the Lakers.
I doubt he cares.
No, I'm sure he doesn't care. He's making his money, and he's not playing poorly. He's just not a guy that I can trust. It's definitely a big change for sure. Not having a full Draymond's clearly not in his prime anymore. Missing 2 straight years of Clay is definitely tough. I feel bad. We're everyone spent 3 years hating on that Warriors team when they had Durant and Clay and Draymond, and now we're being robbed of extra years of seeing them play together. But anyways, it was a good discussion. I think we covered a lot with point guards. That went a little bit farther than I thought. So we'll move along pretty quickly here. Last 2 topics. First one, the Knicks. Look at them. The 4 seed in the East on an 8-game winning streak. Came back to beat the Hawks last night. Trae Young did get hurt in that game, thankfully. Is probably the most positive result. I think they could have gotten on the ankle, so he's only going to miss a couple games. But the Knicks, man, I honestly didn't see this coming. I had them written off as per usual, as I've done the last 4 or 5 years. And suddenly you turn on a Knicks game, and Thibodeau has them playing hard defense every night. He has them running in transition. He has them shooting the ball decently well. Julius Randle shooting a career high, I think he's shooting 40% from 3, 41% from 3. And they're just getting up and down. They're competing, even the games that they're losing, whether if they're playing the Nets, the Sixers, or some of these Western Conference top tier teams, they're playing hard, and they're staying in games longer than I would have ever imagined. Keith, I'll toss it to you. What do we make of this Knicks team? Can they win a playoff series? Either 1 playoff series, 2 playoff series, whatever. And then also to piggyback off of it, Julius Randle, who's having just an absolutely career season, 23, 11, and 6 assists, which I think is the most impressive stat. Does he have a shot at an All-NBA team? So Knicks playoffs chances and Julius Randle All-NBA chances.
I think if the scenario ends like it is now, to where they would be playing the Hawks, I think they could win a playoff series. There are a couple matchups that aren't favorable to them. The Celtics, the Heat, they played either of them. That's not looking good.
You don't think they can beat the Celtics?
Not in the playoffs. Not with the
not 4 out of 7.
Not 4 out of 7. Only because the Celtics have been there before, and a lot of the players of the Knicks have not.
That's fair.
And that's not a knock on Tibbs. He has the coaching experience, but you got an older Derrick Rose, an older Taj Gibson, a fairly still inexperienced Julius Randle. Even though he's been in the league for a while, he hasn't been in this position since ever. But it's kind of like the last chance team. Julius Randle's been shipped so many times. Derrick Rose has had so many injuries. Taj Gibson's been on so many teams. Tibbs has not looked good in the last couple spots he's been. So, I'm really not surprised that they are as good as they are. What makes me curious is knowing Tibbs' history, can he take them to that Eastern Conference Finals level like he did when he had Derrick Rose and Jimmy Butler on the Bulls? And that's yet to be seen. I think they have the potential, but I got to see him do it.
That's fair. Is Tibbs coach of the year for you, or do you have somebody else?
I'm still. I said it on one of the shows. I think my first show, that Doc Rivers is going to be the NBA coach of the year. I think he still is right now. If anyone has
39-19, that's hard to argue with for sure.
If anyone has a chance to take that from him, it's Quinn Snyder in Utah. But I think it has to be one of those two. No one expected the Jazz to be this good. People expected the Sixers to take a leap forward, but they take a ginormous leap forward from last season. So for me, it's still Quinn Snyder or Doc Rivers, but I think you will put Tibbs in the top 5.
Yeah, I think so.
Honorable mention to Nate McMillan too.
Yeah, taking over in Atlanta, and they've won 13 out of 15 or 13 out of 17 or something like that since he took over. Now, do you think Julius Randle makes it All NBA team, even if it's third team? Has he done enough?
Oh, he's going to make at least third team.
Third?
He has to. I think he might even go as high as second team with the push he's made on the second half of the season.
Yeah, because I wrote down really quickly before we got on, I wrote down, like, if I had to pick the teams today, first team would be Curry, Luka, Kawhi, Giannis, Jokic. Second team, Dame, Harden, Paul George, LeBron, Embiid. And then I had Kyrie, Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, and then Randall, Gobert on the third team. But, I mean, if LeBron keeps missing games, I could see where he gets bumped. LeBron has a good body of work for the games he's played in, but if he misses, another two possibly bumping up there. It's a tight list. That's how it is every year with all NBA. There's always like one or two guys that get stiffed. But I think Randall deserves a lot of credit for what he's done. Speaking of Randall, we'll toss it to our Randall. Your thoughts on the Knicks? Do they have a shot to win a playoff series? Like I said, right now they're locked into this 4-5. However, we see how tight 4 through 7. Even if Charlotte makes a run with LaMelo coming back, they could get into there too. Do you think that they could beat any of those teams in the first round series? And then if they make it to the second round against Brooklyn, Philadelphia, or Milwaukee, do they have a chance, not necessarily to upset, because I think that's a little far-fetched, but do they have a chance to like steal a game or two?
I think they have the chance to steal a game or two. And depending on who they go up against, I think they could even steal first round. Just got to put it out there. I said that the smoke would be cleared from the mirrors soon enough. And then here we are. They've moved up the rankings. They're however many games above 500, 4 games above 500. And Julius Randle is playing out of his mind. And I don't know if you guys heard this, but Julius Randle got some inspiration from Kobe Bryant. And when he was at the Lakers, Julius and Kobe went to the hotel, and they got in late at night. And Kobe says, "I'm going to the gym." Julius is like, "What? You're going to the gym at 2 a.m. We just got here. Let's go get some sleep. We got practice in the morning." He's like, "Yeah, I know." So now Julius Randle has adopted that same mentality. No matter when he flies into a city, he's going to the gym. They opened up a gym for him. I forgot what city it was in.
Detroit.
Thank you. You heard about this.
Yep.
So in Detroit, he was working out in that high school gym, and the last person to have done that was Kobe Bryant. So that sends chills down my spine, and just it makes me give all the credit to Julius Randle and the effort that he's been putting into his game. And it's evident, he's hitting fall away jumpers. He's, drifting right. Yeah. And we all thought he was just a left-handed guy that would go left no matter what. We thought we all knew what moves that he had, but shout out to Tyler Ralph too, his trainer. That guy's got him shooting shots and expanding his game like we've never seen before. So most improved player for sure, and all NBA team for sure. And then we got first round. If they don't steal a few games, I would be disappointed.
You didn't have a third for sure there? I thought you were going to be like first round for sure.
I thought about it. Trust me, it crossed my mind.
Yeah, credit to Randall first and foremost. I remember when he was, drafted by my Lakers, and he broke his leg 7 minutes into his first game. Mentally, I can't imagine how deflating that has to be. So for him to come back from that and to work his way to what he is now, which is a phenomenal offensive player, defensively still has work to do there, but his playmaking's been phenomenal. You can't BS your way to 6 assists in this league. You gotta be smart with the ball and put your teammates in good positions to succeed and make shots,
especially with the rosters he's got.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like the Knicks have the most talented roster, but he's been phenomenal. I think it was like 2017 is when he got in good shape. So that's when he spent the entire summer. He lost like 15 pounds, got his body fat down sub 10%. All of a sudden he looked ripped, and he's been continuing that hard work ever since. So kudos to him. Yeah. And I forgot to bring that up too. Most improved player. I think that's his award to lose really at this point. And I do think he makes third team. And like I said, kudos to the Knicks, man. I said it the other day, and everyone's been saying it's the common. I think LeBron even said it too. Like, the NBA is just better when the Knicks are good, because no matter what the Nets do, no matter what the Sixers or the Celtics do, New York is still the Mecca on the East Coast. It's still the hub. It's still the talk of the town. And so to have Los Angeles, both Los Angeles teams doing well on the West Coast, and then to have the Knicks here on the East Coast doing well, it just makes it more fun. The Garden's electric with the fans that they have in there. Thibodeau's done a great job. Thibodeau's gotten teams to win everywhere he's gone, from being the defensive coordinator essentially in Boston to the Chicago Bulls teams. Even he got Minnesota into the playoffs, I think, the year that he was there before that Jimmy Butler drama started. And now he's transformed the Knicks, which is something that they haven't had. They've had Derek Fisher, they've had Jeff Hornacek, they've had David Fizdale, and none of those guys are able to do it. And Thibodeau's actually gotten there. He's got those guys playing. They play hard, and that's something that it's like, it seems simple, but it's difficult to get guys to play hard every night in the NBA because they're professionals. They get paid a lot of money, and they take nights off because it's a long season.
If I had a guy like that screaming at me every play, I'd play hard.
Exactly. And like they don't take days off. Every game they play hard, win or lose, they are always in it. They're never out of the fight. I've seen them have several double-digit point comebacks in the last couple months. So, and again, it's not like he said, it's not like they have the most talented roster. You have an older Derrick Rose, you have an older Taj Gibson, you have some journeymen in Reggie Bullock, you have a young, unproven guy in RJ Barrett, you have Julius Randle, who hasn't really won anything. So to put that group together and to have them winning games, I think is a huge, huge accomplishment. And I think they could win. I think they could beat the Hawks. I think they could beat the Celtics. I think it would be close. The Celtics is a coin flip. I think that could be a 7-game series. It depends on Kemba Walker and how certain things play out for Boston, but I think that would be a very fun series.
I wonder what Henry would have to say about that.
Oh, Henry knows it. Henry's in depression with his Celtics right now. I don't think they beat the Heat. The Heat are good. I think the Heat come playoff time will get it together. But these other teams, Charlotte, Indiana, Washington, I think they could beat them in a series. And that'd be their first series win since 2013. The Carmelo Anthony-led Knicks. So to even do that would be a huge accomplishment and a step in the right direction, because winning a playoff series and showing that you're serious for the first time in almost a decade, not only it gets your fans excited, it gets your ownership, but it gets free agents excited. You start having some cap room, and you actually have guys coming there instead of them pretending that they want to come to play for the Knicks, but they actually want to go to the Nets like Kyrie and KD did, last year or 2 years ago. So I think this opens a lot of doors for them, and I think it's just good. I have nothing against the Knicks. I like seeing the Knicks play well. I like seeing Julius Randle do well as an ex-Laker. I love Derrick Rose. He can have my knees if that would help him.
And one last thing, let's not forget that the Knicks were almost unanimously buried when they traded Kristaps Porzingis to
and they pretty much won that trade.
And I said, well, let's wait and see. Yes, Kristaps Porzingis is a great talent, but is he going to play in Dallas? Because he wasn't playing in New York, and he really hasn't been playing in Dallas. So
no, he hasn't.
He forced his way out of New York too. It might have given him some bad karma.
Yeah, it did. He hasn't been on the court for Dallas. He freed up a lot of money for them to go and make some good signings that were actually better for them. So I got to give him credit where credit is due on that.
Yeah, they seem to really be trending in the right direction for the first time in almost a decade, which I know for Knicks fans, even if you take away those mellow years, they haven't won a playoff. They've won that one playoff series in 2013, and then nothing until, if you go all the way back to like 1999 or 2000, I think was the last one that they actually won a playoff series. So it's been a struggle for Knicks fans. I know a couple of them, and they've been miserable for years. So they're finally have something to cheer about. We're going to wrap up here with just one last bit of news, a little bit of Laker talk, because, I can't go a whole show without the Lakers. We got our man Anthony Davis back in the building tonight against Dallas. He's missed over 30 games, 2 months and change with call it an Achilles, call it a calf, whatever you want to call it, lower body injury that the Lakers took very, very seriously, very cautiously, which I don't blame them. I think I think he probably would have gotten hurt anyway because he is a little bit more injury prone, but I think the injury happened or had a higher chance of happening because of how short of a break that they had from the finals to the start of the season. Nonetheless, the Lakers have been essentially 500 during his and LeBron James' absence, which is better than I could have thought. I really thought we were going to go on the tank. They sit as the 5 seed there, 3 games up on Portland. Like I said, playing Dallas, who is been on a roll, been trying to creep up here into the top 6 seeding where they can avoid the playing game. Keith, I'll toss it to you for our last one here. Just very easy. What are we looking for from Anthony Davis tonight and kind of the rest of the regular season? He's playing in like 15 to 20 minute spurts probably for at least these couple games to get his conditioning back under him. They're not going to rush him into 35, 38 minutes. But what do you want to see from Anthony Davis over the rest of the regular season and come playoff time?
I think they're doing the right thing with him with the minutes restriction. The Lakers overall, The only thing that could have been worse for the Western Conference is if the Lakers went in at the 8th seed. Because odds are in the first round they're going to have a healthy Anthony Davis, a healthy LeBron James. I'm sorry, if the Jazz finish at number 1, they're not beating them in 7 games.
Yeah, Utah's taking a side. They're taking a deep breath of relief right now.
Yeah, but still, it's second worst case scenario because then it looks like they'll probably play my Nuggets in the first round, and the Nuggets are a team that need to build upon each series as we saw in the playoffs last year. But for Lakers, it's best case scenario. They went 14-16 without Davis, and even better, they've gone 7-9 without Davis and LeBron. You can't really ask for much more. So
I'm thrilled with that.
So really, I think the focus is to get Anthony Davis conditioning going. They might even be able to sneak into that 4th seed because I think he is going to add another 2 or 3 wins even in the minutes restriction time. So just get him ready for when LeBron is back because when LeBron gets back, he's going to be ready. I just don't know who beats that team in 7 games fully healthy, like not even the Nets. You get LeBron and AD back. They've added Dennis Schroeder, who's been good. Montrezl Harrell has been good. Ben McLemore has given them quality minutes. Kuzma has gotten valuable minutes with them being out. It's going to be a tough task for anyone to get that team out.
Don't forget my man Alex Caruso. Show some respect.
Some respect
to the GOAT. That's the GOAT.
You can't let everyone know that's a secret weapon.
Oh, he's the secret weapon, the poster child. He's third in my place for Finals MVP from last year. You can call what you want. He's the man. No, I think you make great points. I think you're exactly right. I know for one thing, the Lakers would not be playing him tonight. They wouldn't play him until that they were 110% sure that he was good to go. Because obviously you don't want to run any risk of aggravating the injury. I know Davis said in his interview yesterday that he feels completely healthy. He actually thought he tore his Achilles when it first happened because he felt like a snapping type of twinge in his lower left leg. So the good news is that they avoided that and that he does feel completely healthy. And I'm hoping that he just gets in a rhythm. You obviously got to get the conditioning down. You got to get the feel of playing 5-on-5. He's been playing that in practice, but playing it in practice against your teammates who are instinctively taking it easy against you as opposed to other opponents who aren't going to be. I think it'll be good to get him in a rhythm, and I think it's just enough time. I think if he missed too much more time, it was going to be, that rust was going to carry over into the playoffs. But I think he's going to have enough time. LeBron, I think he'll be fine either way. LeBron's been doing this for almost 20 years. I don't think he has to worry about rust. Randall, your thoughts? What do anything else on Anthony Davis? Do you think that? Keith basically alluded that they might be the best team or the favorites to win as long as LeBron and AD are healthy in the playoffs. Do you see that being the case? Is there an Eastern or Western Conference team that could beat them?
I agree that they are the favorites to win the West if they are both healthy and at full strength.
This is so refreshing. I love this. Raj and Henry would never do this.
It's just the facts, man. They're the best duo in the NBA. So you can't deny the fact that they are that strong and that smart and they also know the teams that they're playing against very well. So it's not a fluke by any means, and it's not just talent. They are up there for a reason. I will say when Kevin Durant had the similar injury, and he came back arguably too early in that NBA Finals against Toronto, he re-aggravated it or tore it ultimately by creating his own shot and using strong footwork to get himself open instead of just when they first put him out there, he was just spotting up from the corner and he was 4 for 4 from 3. And if he would have kept it like that, I think they would have ended up winning that game. But he started creating his own shot. Yes, he started creating his own shot and doing too much with his legs and started feeling really comfortable, and then it snapped. So obviously AD has taken a significant amount of time out, and they, like you said, they wouldn't put him out there if they didn't think it was okay. But it is something to watch to see how comfortable he is with his footwork, and that is one thing that he relies on heavily. I'm surprised you didn't say this though, Jordan. This is the birth of AD squared, man. Like, you got both them big guys out there, and I know they
Andre
probably
Drummond.
won't. They
Don't get me
probably won't
started.
play too much together, but when they do play together,
I hope not.
If you double AD in the post, you got Drummond sitting right there, and then they're both great rim protectors. You don't want to go up against them too often, and then second chance points are going to be through the roof. So
that's what Drummond
about Drummond. And really, the most important thing about Drummond is, as much as people want AD to play the 5, he's just not built to play the 5. His body is not built to be down low that often.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Andre Drummond comes in. He can play the 4, and they can play Drummond at the 5 more if they wanted to. I don't think they will, but they do have that option, and that just takes more stress off his body. And Marcus Gasol, he hasn't been great, but he's still a body they can throw out there at the 5 to take AD away from that position of those minutes.
Yeah, and they played the Nuggets in the first round, and you got Jokic having to guard AD or Drummond. I think Jokic is going to have a rough night. So no offense, Keith. But.
Defensively, yeah. I mean, Jokic has proven that he can handle AD when he has the ball on offense, but on defense, that's where Jokic definitely struggles the most.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good point. I mean, AD's been very vocal about not wanting to play the 5 as long as possible. I think he accepts that he does have to play it at times for the Lakers, and they were undoubtedly that was their best lineup with LeBron at the 4 and him at the 5 last year in the playoffs. And I think that's what they'll do. They're going to save him for the playoffs to play the 5. They might even, theoretically, he wouldn't have to play the 5 until the NBA Finals if they were to make it that far and play the Nets. I think at that point, the Nets have so much spacing and shooting with Durant and Harden and Kyrie and those guys. Drummond is, I'm not going to say unplayable, but he's just not somebody that I'd want to see out there a ton on switches against Kyrie and James Harden. So they would be a little bit better suited having Anthony Davis take over at the 5. But I mean, as a Lakers fan, it's just good to have him back. It's been a long time without any of our stars. I've watched a lot of Kyle Kuzma, a lot of Schroeder and Harrell. Not that they haven't done well, but it's nice to have the guys you're paying the max contracts start to get back on the court at least. That's a pretty good spot to stop it. We covered a lot of stuff today. Thank you guys for coming on. Obviously, I appreciate it. Great discussions as always. As we go here, I'll give it to each of you real quick. Randall, where can we find you, and what do you have coming out, whether it's podcast, stream, writing, anything? What do you have going on in your world here?
Find me at Randall Gimm here on Instagram and Twitter. And I'll be coming out with my first article where I will be giving out the details on if the Timberwolves are trying to force their Anthony Edwards way into the Rookie of the Year race, and how that situation is all playing out and how Chris Finch is using him to his full advantage.
Wow, we got a first article. He's going to be coming out like this, right? Hitting that article. Whoop, whoop. All right, cool. And Keith, where can we find you? What do you guys going on?
Because like it says, at 5280 Keith, I'm actually going to be primarily a lot of NFL coming up lately with the draft coming up. Mm-hmm. Be sure to check us out on Nuts and Bolts for that. We'll have a lot of draft coverage upcoming, so be on the lookout for that.
Cool. Awesome. And you guys know where to find me on Twitter. I'm usually complaining about something or posting a lot of memes. I got Josiah Johnson to retweet me today over something. So that was pretty much the highlight of my day. But yeah,
Twitter MVP right there.
That's literally the Twitter MVP. But yeah, thank you for joining us. As always, make sure you subscribe to Nuts and Bolts Sports. Find them on all social media platforms. And we will see you guys next time. Have a great weekend.